Catholic bishops versus Zambian government. Is Archbishop Alick Banda being silenced? For decades, the Catholic Church has spoken boldly on Zambia's politics. But today, Catholic bishops are making a serious claim that one of their own is being persecuted. They say Bishop Alick Banda is facing pressure not because of crime, but because of conscience. Is this accountability under the law or punishment for speaking truth to power? Tonight, we unpack the facts behind the accusation. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of the InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. Well, what a week it's been across the continent. We've been tracking some truly fascinating stories, and today, we're diving into one that has sent shockwaves through Zambia's corridors of power and into the sacred halls of the Catholic Church. Our lead story today: Catholic bishops versus the Zambian government. Is Archbishop Alick Banda being silenced? Picture this. A man of God stands before his congregation, his voice echoing through the sanctuary as he speaks uncomfortable truths about hunger, economic collapse, and broken promises. His words are sharp, unflinching words that pierce through the comfortable narratives of those in power. He names names. He calls out failures. He demands accountability, but what happens when a shepherd refuses to stay silent? What happens when the pulpit becomes a platform for dissent in a nation where criticism is increasingly met with consequences? Is this a righteous confrontation between moral authority and political power? Or is it, as some whisper in hushed tones, the beginning of a calculated campaign to silence one of Zambia's most vocal religious leaders? When bishops speak and governments threaten, who holds the moral high ground? When pastoral letters become political flashpoints, who decides where faith ends and sedition begins? And when a man of the cloth is accused of destabilizing the very nation he prays for, what does that say about the state of democracy itself? Can a government that claims to champion freedom truly tolerate prophetic voices that refuse to bow? Or are we witnessing the opening chapter of something far more dangerous, the systematic silencing of dissent, one cassock at a time? Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation came to light in late 2024, when tensions between Zambia's Catholic Church leadership and President Hichilema's United Party for National Development government reached a boiling point. It began, as these things often do, with words. On November 24, 2024, the Zambian Conference of Catholic Bishops released their annual Advent Pastoral Letter. The letter, signed by all the bishops including Archbishop Alick Banda of Lusaka, was scathing in its assessment of the country's state of affairs. They condemned what they termed the shrinking democratic space, rampant hunger, economic mismanagement, and the government's failure to uphold constitutional principles. The bishops didn't mince words. They spoke of citizens living in fear, of selective justice, and of a government that appeared more interested in silencing critics than solving problems. The letter specifically called out the rising cost of living, unemployment, and what they described as authoritarian tendencies creeping into governance. The response from government officials was swift and hostile. By early December, ruling party members and government spokespersons had launched a coordinated attack on the bishops. Some accused them of being politically motivated. Others suggested they were working with opposition forces. Still others questioned whether religious leaders had any business commenting on political matters at all. But it was Archbishop Alick Banda who became the primary target. Known for his decades of outspoken advocacy on social justice issues, Archbishop Banda had long been a thorn in the side of successive governments. Under previous administrations, he had called out corruption, human rights abuses, and economic inequality. Now, under Hichilema's government, he was doing the same, and the government appeared determined to make an example of him. By mid-December, reports began circulating that government officials were considering legal action against the archbishop. Accusations of hate speech and inciting public disorder were floated in media interviews. Some government allies even suggested that Archbishop Banda's criticism constituted a threat to national security. The situation escalated further when, in late December, government spokesperson Cornelius Mwitwa publicly stated that the government was studying the pastoral letter and would take appropriate action if it was found to violate any laws. The warning was clear: speak too loudly, and there will be consequences. Direct evidence, quotes and testimony. The pastoral letter itself pulls no punches. In one particularly pointed section, the bishops wrote, We are deeply concerned about the shrinking democratic space in our country. Citizens are living in fear of expressing their opinions. There is selective application of justice, where some are prosecuted for minor offenses while others, who commit more serious crimes, walk free. This double standard is eroding public trust in our institutions. They continued. Hunger is ravaging our nation. Families are going to bed without food. The cost of Mayalai meal, our staple food, has become unbearable for the ordinary Zambian. Yet, those in power seem detached from this reality. They speak of economic progress while the majority suffer. And then, most damning of all, we call upon the government to stop weaponizing state institutions against perceived enemies. The police, the judiciary, and regulatory bodies must serve the people, not the interests of a political elite. Democracy cannot thrive in an atmosphere of intimidation. Archbishop Alick Banda, in a subsequent interview with a local radio station, defended the letter with characteristic defiance. "We are not politicians," he said. "We are pastors. Our duty is to speak the truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. If the government is doing well, we commend them. If they are failing the people, we must say so. That is our prophetic role." When asked whether he feared repercussions, the Archbishop's response was measured but firm. "I have served this church for over 40 years. I have seen governments come and go. I have been threatened before, and I am still here. My allegiance is to God and to the people of Zambia, not to any political party. If speaking the truth makes me a target, then so be it." Government spokesperson Cornelius Mwitwa, however, saw things very differently. In a press conference on December 18, 2024, he stated, "We respect the church and its leaders, but respect must be mutual. When religious leaders make sweeping accusations without evidence, when they paint a picture of a country in crisis that does not reflect reality, they do a disservice to the nation." Archbishop Banda's remarks, they border on incitement. "We are a nation of laws, and no one, not even a man of the cloth, is above the law." When pressed by journalists on whether the government intended to prosecute the Archbishop, Mwitwa became evasive. "Look, we are studying the letter. We are consulting with legal experts. If we find that any provisions of our laws have been violated, we will act accordingly. But let me be clear, this is not about silencing anyone. This is about accountability." Opposition leader and former President Edgar Lungu, himself no stranger to accusations of authoritarian tendencies during his tenure, weighed in with a statement that many found ironic. "The UPND government is showing its true colors. They came to power promising democracy and freedom of speech, but now they want to silence the church. Archbishop Banda has the right to speak, and the people have the right to hear what he has to say. This intimidation must stop." Civil society organizations also rallied behind the Archbishop. Brebner Changala, a prominent human rights activist, stated, "This is a test of our democracy. If we allow the government to intimidate and potentially prosecute religious leaders for speaking out, we are setting a dangerous precedent. Today it's Archbishop Banda. Tomorrow it could be any of us." Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. So what are we really witnessing here? Is this simply a spat between church and state, or is it a symptom of something deeper, a democracy under strain? Let's examine the broader context. President Hichilema's UPND came to power in 2021 on a wave of popular support, promising to restore democratic norms after years of what many saw as democratic backsliding under Edgar Lungu's Patriotic Front government. Hichilema himself had been a victim of political persecution, having been arrested and detained on treason charges in 2017, charges that were eventually dropped but which many viewed as politically motivated. Yet here we are, just 3 years into his presidency, and Hichilema's government is facing similar accusations of intolerance toward criticism. Opposition figures have been arrested on what critics call flimsy charges. Media outlets perceived as hostile to the government have faced intimidation. And now, the Catholic Church, one of Zambia's most respected institutions, is in the government's crosshairs. Legal experts point out that Zambia's laws on hate speech and public disorder are vaguely worded, leaving significant room for interpretation and potential abuse. Dr. Munandulo, a constitutional law professor, explained in a recent interview. The problem with laws that criminalize offensive or insulting speech is that they can be weaponized against legitimate criticism. What one person considers constructive feedback, another might call incitement. Without clear, narrow definitions, these laws become tools of oppression. Politically, the government's aggressive response has backfired to some extent. Public opinion polls, while limited, suggest that many Zambians sympathize with the bishop's criticisms. The rising cost of living is very real. Food insecurity is widespread. And the perception that the government is more interested in protecting its image than addressing these problems has only grown stronger in the wake of this controversy. Some political analysts argue that the government's reaction reveals a deeper insecurity. Dr. Sishiwa, a political scientist specializing in Zambian politics, noted, "When a government feels secure in its legitimacy, it can afford to ignore or engage constructively with criticism. When it feels threatened, it lashes out." The UPND's response to the bishop suggests a government that is worried about public opinion, worried about its record, worried about the next election. The Catholic Church, for its part, has not backed down. In a follow-up statement issued on December 28, 2024, the bishops reiterated their concerns and called on the faithful to pray for the nation. They also made clear that they would not be intimidated. "We are not criminals. We are not enemies of the state. We are servants of God and advocates for the poor and marginalized. If that makes us inconvenient, then we embrace that inconvenience. But questions remain. What will the government do next? Will they actually file charges against Archbishop Banda? And if they do, what precedent will that set for freedom of expression in Zambia?" There's also the question of regional implications. Zambia has long been seen as one of Southern Africa's more stable democracies. If religious leaders can be prosecuted for criticism, what message does that send to neighboring countries where democratic space is already under threat? And finally, there's the question of the church's role. Some argue that religious leaders should stay out of politics entirely, that their focus should be purely spiritual. But others counter that faith without action is meaningless, that prophetic witness requires speaking truth to power, regardless of the political consequences.